Hi guys, welcome to our virtual workshop for science.
So my name is Srijal and this is Murtaza here. And we're both graduates of Thirsk. We graduated in the year 2018. So you guys are the class of 2022, if I'm not wrong. That will be the year when we graduate university. So it has been a while since we've been in high school, but we do remember it pretty well. Um, Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, we've been forced to deliver these so-called workshops in an online manner, but we hope that you guys are still able to learn some of the same things that that occurred at the workshops when they happened last year.
So what our aim is with this workshop is to give you guys a general overview of how to be a scientist in university. And what we're mainly targeting is giving you guys the opportunity to start building on some strategies and some practices that will help you succeed in university science.
So, like I said, we both graduate university in the year 2022, same year you guys graduate high school. That makes us third year students at the University of Calgary. So I'm in the neuroscience program at U of C, and I just wanted to tell you guys a bit about my journey and how I got into this program. So when I was in high school, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. There were a lot of different things that interested me, but I couldn't figure out, okay, like what is the program that I should choose? I thought about engineering, I thought about psychology. Both of them seemed pretty boring to me. But eventually, in my Bio 30 class is when I had my aha moment. And that was when we started talking about the nervous system. The question I asked to myself is, why do we know so little about the brain? The brain controls everything we do, it makes us who we are. Why is it that we know next to nothing about something that's seemingly the most important organ in our body? And that is the question that I ran with. And it has been a motivating factor for the past 2.5 years, going on to 3 years now. And it has been a great journey. And a question like this has really provided me with a lot of the drive that is needed to complete university.
So just a little bit about myself also. So I'm a little bit different than Sergio because I didn't exactly know what degree I wanted to enter into when I went into university, but I did know that I had an end goal of wanting to become a dentist. So I had to look at the different degree options and understand what do you need to become a dentist. There's obviously some prerequisites there, and what interests me and what will I enjoy doing in order to finally get to dental school. So what I did end up choosing was just a general biological sciences degree when entering university. After my second year, I had been exposed to different sorts of biology and the different fields in biology. And what I really took a liking to was cell biology. And the U of C offers a program known as CMMB, which is cellular molecular microbial biology. And so I decided to do an honors in the CMMB degree, and I'm currently still in the honors CMMB degree and hope to graduate by 2022, like Sturgill said. Um, and hopefully after that, or even before that, I will get accepted into a dental school and I can start my journey on to becoming a dentist.
So, before we delve into specific learning strategies and things that you guys can apply right now, we just wanted to give you guys a little taste of what university might look like for you if you are interested in the sciences. So, this is my schedule as a first year student. Um, as you can see, I had to take all three sciences as well as an intro to psychology course. So this is typical of any other science student. The only thing that really kind of set me apart was the fact that I had to do this Neuro 201 course, which you can see at the bottom, which was the introduction to neuroscience. So looking back at the schedule and now knowing what my learning style is like, I would definitely make a few changes. First and foremost, I would opt to have evening labs instead of morning ones. So as you can see, Mondays I would have my physics lab in the morning, Wednesdays I'd have my bio lab in the morning, and then Fridays I would have my chem lab in the morning. The reason I would want to make this change is that labs in university don't involve much learning. Rather, they're an application of what has already been taught to you in class. So, for example, it could be about a certain technique or a certain procedure, and it's about your ability to perform those techniques and procedures. Because of this, I would choose to have my classes in the morning instead of my labs. And the reason for that is I learn the best in the morning. So that would allow for better retention of all the material that we've gone through.
So the general bioscience first year timetable is mostly the same actually as Srijal just described. Like he said, the only thing really differentiating him from the general biosci route was that he had to take a neuroscience class. So the normal general biosci will also have to take the three sciences. So in this case, you would choose biology, chemistry, and then you're given an option of either computer science, physics, or geology. You also get the choice of two non-science options, and every undergrad, for the most part, also has to take introductory calculus, which is Math 249 or 265 at the University of Calgary. And that's pretty much what your first year schedule will look like if you took 5 classes in both fall and winter semesters.
So this is just a glimpse of what our second year schedules look like. Now, second year in the sciences is infamous for its difficulty. Don't be scared. That's the last thing that we want to show to you guys is how difficult and crazy it is. Like it looks much more tough than it actually is. You learn to work better by the time you get to second year, and you genuinely start to enjoy the challenge. But as we move on into third year, um, you can see our current schedules are significantly lighter compared to first year and compared to second year. Now, the reason for this is that most of the classes they don't have a lab component. And also in your third and fourth year is when you start to specialize. So as you can see in my schedule, so my schedule is the one on the left here. I have 3 neuroscience classes and 1 zoology class. So that is really it's a part of specializing. I get to take neuroscience specific classes as well as zoology, which is technically a general bio course for third years. Um, and yeah, so Murtaza now will just talk a little bit about his schedule in the upper years.
So yeah, just like Sergio said, we get to specialize. So everyone tells you when you're in high school that when you go to university, you choose a degree and you actually get to start studying what you enjoy studying. So maybe in the first couple years, this might not be the case because for the first few years in the sciences, most science students have to take mostly the similar classes to develop a strong fundamental foundation in the sciences. But in the later 2 years or the last 2 years, you start seeing that I am taking more CMMB classes. I share the zoology class with Sergil because that was an option of mine. And then I'm also gonna start seeing more biochemistry because it is part of the degree for CMMB to take a few biochemistry classes. But other than that, I'm taking CMMB classes and it's stuff I enjoy, uh, and there also is less laboratories. Most of these are lecture-based classes or research-based classes that you will be doing in your later years.
So now we want to say a quick word about how university learning looks like during a global pandemic. Now, this isn't to say you guys will also have to experience university online, knock on wood that you guys don't have to, but the shift has revealed that online classes are possible. So it would not be a surprise to see a lot more classes offered online in coming years.
So, online university looks like a lot of self-time managing. A lot of our classes are pre-recorded and they're known as asynchronous classes. So you won't be attending these classes with your fellow classmates. Instead, the professor will most likely just post the lectures online and they will give you a timetable of when the first midterm is and what material you should have covered up until this point. So what my strategy is to do these classes on their regularly scheduled time so that I don't get left behind. However, with just as life or just as you would go to normal classes, things may get in the way. You may miss a class. And at this point, you have to time manage and realize that you need to start catching up on one class or maybe have to prioritize an assignment or a paper over going to the lecture. And that all comes down to you and your own personal preferences. And I can't stress this enough, but time managing is highly important. You don't want to be the kid that is grinding for 6 lectures behind 2, 3 days before a midterm because online lectures aren't necessarily relatable to their time. So say I have a 1 hour lecture. That doesn't mean it will take me 1 hour to get through that lecture. Instead, like taking notes, reading the material, getting used to the material will take longer. All the pauses in order for you to finish copying down what the prof has just said will take time, and this can often extend the lecture time maybe by 15, 20 minutes per like lecture. So this all comes down to you at the end of the day and how you will be able to uh, deal with your own time managing.
So Murtaza brings up an important point there about time management. Um, it is very, very key in university. Now, it doesn't, even if you're in person versus online, it you still need to be able to manage time. But personally, I've noticed for myself with online classes, I've had to manage and schedule much more. Now, the reason for this is most of my classes are what you call asynchronous. So, asynchronous classes refers to the professor just uploads their lecture video, much like what we're doing right now, and you watch it on your own time. So, I've been a lifelong procrastinator. So, for me, being able to actually stick to a schedule is really tough. So at the start of online school, I was that kid that Murtaza just described who was watching 6 lecture videos the day before a midterm in order to learn all the material. But I did get better with it and I realized what works for me. And online learning, it has its benefits and it has its drawbacks. Like if a class is scheduled for 9 a.m., for example, I don't have to be in front of my computer at 9 a.m. because they're always going to be recorded and posted on D2L. I can wake up whenever I want, I can go to bed whenever I want. Um, so that is a benefit. But then there's also the drawback of you start to forget what day of the week it is. Like honestly, I couldn't tell you if it was a Saturday, Monday, Wednesday, or a Tuesday right now. But you roll with the punches.
Now, this isn't to say that all of your classes will be asynchronous. So some of them could be synchronous, especially labs. You'll see the online labs are always synchronous because they want to recreate the actual lab environment. But instead of actually performing the labs, you're more likely to just watch the TA or the lab coordinator just perform the labs. They'll give you data and you will do the assignment associated with the lab. So synchronous classes are usually held on Zoom, where most of the students will attend. Some profs will be generous and will record these synchronous lectures and then post them up in case you missed the live lecture. In other cases, profs don't like this and want you to actually be in attendance of the lecture. For example, one of my classes is a presentation-based class in which it's student-led. In this case, some students may not like being recorded, in which case you have to be at the class every day or every other day and take notes. And otherwise, you hope to make friends or you won't get the notes.
So that's just a little bit about what online university looks like. One big shift that both of us had to go through when we were taking science in high school versus taking science in university was this idea of scientific research. Now, you've all heard of the scientific method, I'm sure. It's probably been hammered into you since junior high, but it gets even more hammered into you in university because of how integral it is to do true research. Now, for you guys, research might look like, you know, asking a question and then finding the answer to it online using various sources. With scientific research, what you're really doing is you're posing a question that no one else has ever asked before, and you're performing experiments to prove your hypothesis. So here we just have an example of a research article. So the title of this research article is it's about multiple sclerosis and the associations between physical disability and depression and how it's not mediated by self-reported physical activity. So these kinds of scientific articles are going to show up more and more as you go along in your university career. When I was in first year, I had to read maybe 2 or 3 papers. Second year, it increased. Now in third year, I have to read a paper almost every day for one of my classes because this is true science. This isn't things you need for background knowledge. This is actually what's occurring in the scientific field currently at the moment. Now, reading these articles can be quite challenging and it is a big learning curve. So, in order to reduce that learning curve a little bit, we just wanted to take you through this article and show you guys how you can actually approach this article and answer a few questions without having to read the entire 18 pages. This is an 18-page article.
So just a little bit to add to Sergil's description of scientific research. We do scientific research because at the higher university level, most of the classes and most of the topics you'll be covering will be groundbreaking science. They won't be anything that's written in the textbooks. There will be experimentations that are going on across the world that are trying to advance their field. So in this case, it won't be as simple as you searching up a question and finding an answer. Most classes in university, this isn't the case. If you try, for example, to search up an assignment question online, instead of finding a direct answer, you'll probably get linked to about many research articles, and then you'll think and you'll have to decide, should I read these articles? And you'll have to find ways and techniques that are efficient for reading and getting as much information out of these articles in as small of a time span as possible. So we've made a few questions in regards to scientific research that you may want to ask yourself. I don't think, or for the most part, assignments won't directly answer or ask you for these questions, but instead these are like the questions you have to ask yourself when you're reading research articles. In order to understand what the goal of the experiment or the goal of the article was.
So, we're just going to take you through a few questions. So, to start off, we always need to ask ourselves, what is the objective of the study? What were the experimenters actually trying to find out? So now a typical article is split up into 4 sections, 5 sections actually. You start off with the abstract. The abstract is really just a summary of everything that occurred. So it's like the back of a book cover, essentially. It describes what happened, what the results were in a clear and succinct manner. That abstract is usually put at the start of the article. Then you get to your introduction. Now, the introduction is the actual formal beginning of a scientific paper. The introduction tries to tell a story, tries to justify why asking that question is actually important to the scientific field. After the introduction, most papers typically talk about their introduction, or sorry, after the introduction, they talk about their method. So that's the methodology that they used in order to achieve, or in order to answer the question that they were trying to answer. And then after that, you get into your results, which is the kind of formalization of all of the data that they've gathered. It's got all the fancy statistics and math, and the results section is something that you're rarely going to be reading. And then finally, you have your discussion, which talks about your results in in the larger scheme of things. It's the place of this. It's Yeah, it's talking about the place of the study in the scientific world and why it's actually important that this research occurred and what the results imply. So what was the objective of the study? Well, this can actually be found straight up in the very first sentence of the abstract. So this study investigated the interrelatedness of physical disability, physical activity, and depression among patients with multiple sclerosis. That tells you everything that you need to know about the study in terms of, okay, what are they actually doing?
So another question you may want to ask yourself that's really important is, what was their hypothesis? So a hypothesis is basically their question. They're asking, and the hypothesis is not their question, sorry, it's uh their expectation or prediction of what will happen in the experiment that they have outlined. So in this case, you can find the hypothesis in some papers in the abstract, in others below here. This was taken from the introduction of the paper. Here we can see that they're pretty similar in this paper. They hypothesized that self-reported physical activity would mediate the effect of disability on depressive symptoms. So the hypothesis gives you insight onto what the goal of the article is and how they are planning on and what they are expecting to get as results out of the research that they are conducting.
So, another question that is very, very important to ask is the idea of variables. So, we're I'm sure you guys know of this because we learned this when we were in high school. It's the idea of independent and dependent variables. So, your independent variable is essentially the thing that you change. It is the factor that you, as an experimenter, are manipulating. So, in this case, the independent variable are the self-reported physical activity levels. Now, identifying that can be a little tough, but again, this is still part of the abstract. We did not have to read further than that. To move on to the dependent variable. So the dependent variable is the thing that is affected by the change that you're making. So in this case, the dependent variable are the symptoms of depression. So they're trying to make a relation between physical activity levels and the symptoms of depression. So that shows you, okay, what are they trying to find a relationship between?
So what you will find is that they will post their findings most likely in the discussion. For sure, you'll get a little like glimpse at what the key findings were in the abstract, because the abstract is there to entice the reader. in a way. It wants to make you want to read the article, but the majority of the findings will be in either the results or the discussions. For the most part, the results won't make sense to you and will be very difficult, and you'll find yourself spending a lot of time trying to understand the results. So for the most part, I usually skip the results and just go straight to the discussion, because the discussion highlights what's important in the results, and it will be written in a way that's easily understandable for you uh, in regards to the study. So here we can see that their key findings on the study were that in the sample of adult patients that they took that were diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, the higher disability scores and more depressive symptoms were associated with uh, with lower self-reported levels of physical activity. Uh, and these were statistically unrelated to their degree of disability. So in a sense, what they're saying here is that people who report generally just self-report lower levels of activity will find themselves with higher depression-like symptoms than those that are continuously active um, throughout their life.
So now we want to end off by giving you guys a few tips of how to succeed in the science world. Now, we're sure that these are things that you guys already do and imply because you are all inquisitive and curious, hopefully, but they're still worth mentioning.
So some points I can talk about are networking within your classes and asking questions. So for me, attending a lecture of say 200 to 300 students is daunting. I'm not the one to raise my hand and ask a question. Everyone has some fear of like sounding dumb or maybe not or maybe like your peers like snickering at you, so on. So maybe you don't want to ask these questions. Well, the good thing is, for the most part, even online and in school, professors will stay 10 minutes post lecture in order to answer your questions. So you can go up to the prof at the end of the class, and any questions you had throughout the class you can bring up to him, and he will, like, most likely he or she will answer for you. If you have a class after this class, most professors will also have office hours, and you can also email them. Email responses usually get back to you within a day. And I find that office hours are really helpful because you can go to the professor's office and you can be in a one-on-one opportunity with the professor, and they will take as much time as needed or as much time as they have in order to try and explain concepts to you that you're struggling with. And I found that throughout my university career, going to office hours or even emailing professors was really helpful in like clarifying hard concepts for me. Another main thing that I found was making friends. Science is kind of daunting as a degree, unlike maybe arts or some of the other degrees in university, in that people in science are highly, highly competitive. Some are maybe competitive to a fault, in which they don't want to share information with you and they don't want to share what they're doing with you. I'm not really sure why to this day, but for me, what I find is, like, get friendly with the people around you in classes. If you're in online, which again, we hope that you're not, this is a little harder because direct messaging someone on Zoom isn't really the way I would go about it. But in person, you're in a lecture hall, look to your right, look to your left, make conversation, get things going. You'll find yourself usually sitting in around the same area of the lecture hall every class. So you get to know the people that sit around you. This is your key. This is how you will succeed in the sciences. You got to make friends, because having friends just helps a lot. Like, more minds together think better. You'll get more ideas. You'll get greater exposure to different information that way, because people do different research, do their own research. This is the key that I found. Generating a good science support group is important. Another way to do this is through labs. You're always most likely going to be stuck with one lab partner, maybe two lab partners throughout a semester. You should try and make that lab partner a friend of yours. Get their number, get their contact, talk to them about lab assignments, talk to them about the lab, the pre-labs, so on. This will help you throughout your entire degree.
I would echo exactly what Murtaza has said there. Um, Reaching out to your professors is key, not only to understand the concepts, but they're actually people too. And if you get to know them, having a professor as a contact can go a really long way. Now, in terms of making friends, it is probably the most important thing of university. No matter what program that you're in, you will need friends to be able to get through it. So please, please, please network, force yourself to be social. It is extremely, extremely important. Now, one last thing that I would add in terms of how to succeed in science, um, this was probably actually the biggest learning curve for the both of us, was the idea that everything that you learn in each of your classes can be applied to another class. So what I'm trying to say is something that you learn in biology, for example, it can and will be applied to something that you learn in chemistry, which can and will be applied to something that you learn in physics. Science is an interconnected discipline. There is no there's no neuroscience without cell biology. There's no cell biology without biochemistry. There's no biochemistry without basic physics. Everything relates to each other. So the earlier you try to realize that and the quicker you try to make connections between each of your classes, the easier the concept is going to be to understand. Now, you guys might think that university is all about rote memorization and trying to retain as much information as possible, which to a certain degree isn't wrong. Like we've both definitely had classes that have required high levels of memorization and information retention. But as we've gone along, we've realized the more you understand the concept, the easier it becomes to understand the details. And understanding the concept only comes when you actually think about it and try to relate it to other things. So that would be kind of the biggest piece of advice I would say. And I think Murtaza would echo the same thing in terms of something that you guys could even start now. Like say you're in bio 20. If you're learning about the heart and how the heart works, and you're learning about cardiac output, for example, try and relate that to physics. Like, okay, how can cardiac output be related to blood pressure? Pressure is a concept of physics. Try to create those connections and you'll see science in an entirely different light.
So what Sergio just mentioned will greatly, greatly increase how easy classes are for you throughout university. What I've noticed is many classes in university will use the same concepts over and over again and build on these concepts. That's why it's so important to develop that strong foundation in each of your introductory science classes before you're able to move on. I wouldn't memorizing is good, yes, as you have a retention of all this information, but understanding is where it's key. Your understanding of science will take you further than just plain memorization. I would just like to end off on that.
So yeah, that is it's very true. Like your understanding is going to take you much further than memorization will. So if you guys listen to this video, thank you so much. We hope that you got something out of it. And if you have any questions, we will see you at the Q&A session on March 19th during your Connect class. Thank you so much, and we hope you guys have a great day or a great night or an afternoon, whatever, whenever time you guys are watching this.
Thanks.